But I think in coaching specifically, we need more proof. We need more evidence-based practice generally, and even more so in AI coaching.
Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast series. In this episode of Coaching Revealed, Institute of Coaching Executive Director Jeff Hull interviews Professor Nicky Terblanche, and the two discuss the development of artificial intelligence bots and tools in the realm of coaching. Nicky shares his unique background and the fascinating journey that led him to investigate the potential of AI to disseminate and scale coaching. The conversation uncovers the unexpected success of early AI chatbots in facilitating goal achievement and delves into the critical factors influencing user adoption, such as differing perspectives from clients and coaches. Nicky discusses his current research, which spans diverse areas like tailoring AI coaches to individual preferences, understanding user responses to different chatbot interfaces, and exploring the nuances of directive versus non-directive AI coaching styles. He also touches upon the uncanny valley effect in designing human-like AI. Looking to the future, Nicky emphasizes the potential for AI to augment coaching in various ways, from training human coaches to analyzing coaching sessions. While optimistic about the possibilities, he cautions against excessive hype and stresses the importance of thoughtful development and potential regulation to ensure quality and ethical application of AI in coaching. The episode provides a comprehensive and insightful look at the current state and future trajectory of AI in coaching, highlighting both its promise and the crucial distinctions between AI coaching and other forms of AI-driven guidance. Thanks for tuning into Coaching Revealed. Let's get started.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Coaching Revealed, the podcast from the Institute of Coaching. My name is Jeffrey Hull. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Coaching, and I am really excited to have a special guest for our Artificial Intelligence and Coaching series. With me today, Nicky Terblanche, a professor and also an early adopter of artificial intelligence and a serious researcher in the space. And we are super excited to have Nicky here to give us kind of a background on how his research got started and then also what the latest is in that area, because it keeps changing very rapidly. So we want to welcome you to the Coaching Revealed podcast and dive right in. Hello, Nicky.
Hi, Jeff. Great to see you again and to be on your show today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to join our listeners at the Institute of Coaching. I've had an opportunity to get this wonderful series started around artificial intelligence and coaching, talking to colleagues, Jonathan Passmore and Rebecca Rushman, and they always bring up your name. So we are excited that you're here with us. And I do want to take 1 minute just to give folks that perhaps don't know you a little bit about your background. You have kind of a unique trajectory, having been both a professor, a coach, and also a researcher, kind of at the intersection of all three. Dr. Nicky Terblanche is an associate professor in leadership coaching, research methodology, and information systems at the University of Stellenbosch Business School in South Africa. He also runs a private executive coaching practice and is the founder of CoachVici.com, which I think is artificial intelligence related. So I'm going to ask him about that. He lectures in the MBA programs and the Master of Philosophy coaching programs at the University of Stellenbosch Business School and is also a research supervisor. He himself has a PhD in business management from the University of Stellenbosch and has conducted workshops all over the world in over 20 countries. He's traveled to over 45 countries, and his specialties, as I mentioned, are research, qualitative research, artificial intelligence research, leadership transitions, applied AI, transformative learning, solutions architecture, executive and management coaching. We have a serious thought leader in the house. So I am really excited to have you here. And I think the best place to start in our Coaching Revealed podcast is always a little bit personal, which is, how did you get to be where you are?
Yeah, thanks for that intro, Jeff. Yeah, I'm always so interested to hear coaches' life stories because no one starts out as a coach. We all have very many different paths we followed. And when we do the intake of our master students every year, I'm always fascinated to see their background. So mine is also quite varied. It started out being an engineer. So I did electronic and software engineering many, many years ago, incidentally specializing in artificial intelligence in speech recognition. That literally is 25 years ago. And at that stage, I knew nothing about coaching or psychology or anything fluffy. I was a hardcore scientist. If you can't prove it with numbers, it doesn't exist. About 10 years into my engineering career, I started realizing there's something missing. I felt I really wanted to understand myself better. I wanted to understand why I think the way I do, what made me to be who I am. And that introduced me to the fascinating world of psychology and eventually coaching. For me, myself, I went through coaching and I realized the powerful effect it had on me. And I just wanted to share that with the rest of the world. So I wanted to become an engineer of people, basically re-engineering people through coaching.
Re-engineering people. I love that.
That's what an engineer would say who just became a coach. later on, I realized it's far more subtle than that. But that's essentially how I got into coaching. Incidentally, I thought I was done with the world of engineering, and I thought I'm now focusing on people development and helping people grow and learn. But the engineering background and interest in me kept niggling away in the background. And that's eventually how about 5-6 years ago, before the hype of ChatGPT and generative AI, I thought, let me dust off my engineering and software coding skills and let me start building a few chatbots to see if we could democratize and scale coaching. And that's essentially how I got to this point where I am now.
Wow. So you had pretty much moved out of the engineering and software development space and into the coaching space.
Yeah.
And was it really artificial intelligence that sort of drew you back in again?
On the engineering side, yes. Look, I thought I was done with engineering. I really thought I was just going to focus on the people side of things. But then 2018, 2019, around there was a lot of talk about AI going on. And I attended a few conferences where I heard people speak about the potential role of AI in coaching. And the one thing you have to know about me, I'm an empiricist. So I wanted to do, it's easy to claim things. But I think in coaching specifically, we need more proof. We need more evidence-based practice generally, and even more so in AI coaching. So when I heard people talk about how AI is going to transform the world of coaching, I was a bit curious, and I thought, but we have no proof. This is all conceptual. It's all philosophical. So then I decided, I am in a unique position. There are not many people like me, I think, who have an engineering background in software and coaching. And I thought, well, let me then, as a service to the coaching industry and to satisfy my own curiosity, let me go and create AI coaches and see how well they work. So you're right. That's probably what drew me back into the engineering side of things. But I'm still at heart a coach.
Well, yeah. And before we move into the AI research, I'm curious to step back one more time. Did you find becoming a coach satisfying, given that you were a scientist at heart?
Absolutely. It was the best thing I could ever have done. And, if you ask my wife, we've been married for 25 years this year. She said it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Congratulations.
Although she says, she jokes sometimes, she says maybe time for a refresher, maybe I should go and do the training again just to go through that initial phase of absolute euphoria and awareness about what it means to be more self-aware. I think the engineering is a big part of me, but at heart I am a coach, and it changed completely who I am as a person. From an opinionated, someone who's very convinced that I have all the answers or many answers, the engineer, to someone who asks questions and is curious, who's open. And I think that helped me to become a good researcher later on, by not assuming and not judging, but actually keeping an open mind. So it was life-changing for me to become a coach, definitely. And also just the number of people we touch, the lives we touch. I've coached hundreds of people through the years, more than 2,000 hours of coaching. And I still vividly remember some of my clients and how they tell me that the coaching has transformed their lives, not necessarily because I'm an amazing coach, but just through the process that we follow. And if you're well trained, you can really change not just individuals, but families and organizations. So I think it's one of the most powerful individual change interventions known to us, which is why I love it so much.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I have to say, you must have had a good coach yourself.
Several, yeah, inspiring. And incidentally, I also found it very, very helpful to go through a few sessions of therapy to understand psychology and the psychological underpinnings. So for me, that was an important change initiative initially on. Now, of course, we train around about between 30 and 40 coaches every year through the master's program. And I do supervision of PhD and master students in coaching, and I learn constantly from them. That's what's so amazing, to see people grow and change and stay on top of things.
Well, I completely align with you because I think in order to be a good coach, you really need to always be on a learning journey. You can't consider yourself to have finished, no matter how many letters you have after your name.
Exactly.
And especially in today's world where artificial intelligence in some form is rapidly becoming quite capable. And in order to stay ahead of the game, in order to stay committed to human coaches, we have to be better than the artificial ones, right? We need to continue growing and continue expanding and making sure that we're adding value as humans, or unfortunately, we really will be replaced, which I'm not predicting, but I do think that it's a maybe remote, but it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, we'll probably talk about my research a bit later, but one of the first studies I did, it was the first study that I'm aware of, comparing human and artificial intelligence coaching, actually showed remarkable results in that an AI coach can be very effective in executing a very specific model-based approach. For example, the GROW model. If human coaches coach at that level, then I'm afraid you have some serious competition coming your way. But but the good news is that there are still many things that AI cannot do that humans can do. And to your point, that's for us then to embrace that and to keep growing and learning.
So, yeah, let's talk about that early study because I think it was probably the very first published study of AI in comparison with human coaching that I had read. And that was what, 2 years ago, maybe? So, talk a little bit about how that took place and then maybe, how have things evolved? But it's good to ground because that was one of the very first studies that I was aware of.
I'm looking at my publication list here, and it was published in 2022. But the study was done in a year or two before that. So that is before, the important thing is before generative AI was available. So how this worked was, I was at a conference in Switzerland and I met some of the participants there, and Joanna Molan, specifically from Oxford Brookes in the UK. And they had just completed a study with Eric Dehaan, who you might also know, on it's a 10-month study where they had a randomized control trial where they had a group of people that received human coaching and then another group that did not receive any coaching. And they compared them over 10 months and they measured multiple things like resilience, wellness, goal attainment. And the human coaching group outperformed the control group on all accounts, which is what we would expect. So when I heard this, I thought, let's repeat this study. So let's do a replication study, but instead of human coaches, let's use an AI coach. And I then created an AI chatbot coach without ChatGPT. This is before ChatGPT existed. That's what's important here. Using the GROW model and taking people through a very structured process of goal setting, nudges. It basically was implementing goal theory very accurately, very precisely, which is setting goals that are smart, understanding long-term and short-term goals, and nudging, cheerleading, all of those kind of things. We repeated the test, so we had two more groups, people that used the chatbot and the control group who had no intervention, also 10 months. And we measured the same things as for the human coaching. But in this case, the people were not limited to the number of sessions. They could use the chatbot whenever, because of course it's for free and it's available 24/7. And then we found that from the 4 measures we did, only goal attainment improved for the chatbot group. So the chatbot was not able to improve resilience, well-being, and stress. I think the other ones we measured, which we expected because the chatbot was only programmed to be a goal attainment chatbot. And that's one of the important things about artificial intelligence, and especially narrow artificial intelligence. It's very good at specific tasks, but you can't expect it to do everything. And I think it's kind of the things we have to keep in mind, even with generative AI. And then basically, in conclusion, we compared then the chatbot intervention group with the human coaching group a year before on goal attainment, and we found that the chatbot performed remarkably well. It trailed the human coaching group slightly, and towards the end, the people that had the AI chatbot coach had this similar amount of goal attainment to the human coaching group. And I was honestly so shocked that I asked a different statistician to run the stats again to make sure we didn't make a mistake, because I did not expect that to happen.
I'm curious, were they doing, I remember reading the article, but was the chatbot on a phone or was it on a computer? How did they do the interface?
Yeah, it was on a phone, and it's the same philosophy I use at the moment with Coach Vici, the chatbot that I've created. We use it on an instant messaging platform like WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. Some of the everyday applications. Because the idea is if you have a separate app on your phone, you're unlikely to use it as much as when it's integrated into WhatsApp, for example, or texting or instant messaging. So that's the philosophy we followed.
And was there anything done around confidentiality? Because WhatsApp and Signal, as we know, are not particularly good at confidentiality.
Well, so this is of course, one of the things with AI coaching is that one has to be aware of data protection measures and all of that. So we cannot control what goes through the WhatsApp channel. That's a communication channel. We have to trust that what they say is true, which is that they encrypt the message and they won't use it. On the back end, of course, when we collect the data, we have control over that. So there we can put our protection measures in place. But I do also think, and maybe we can touch on it now or later, I wrote a paper a while ago in the Journal of Applied Behavioral Science where I tried to debunk some of the myths around ethics and AI, where people will tell you, first of all, we should be careful because of data confidentiality and this and that. And my counter argument, slightly trying to push the boundaries a little bit, is to say that we have to also be careful we don't exaggerate the ethical challenges and in the process not make use of AI, because we exaggerate what could possibly go wrong. And there are ways to mitigate things like that. And I always tell people, we trust banks with online banking to manage our money for us, it could be hacked at any time. Is a coaching conversation more risky than, having all your money in a bank?
It's a very good analogy. Obviously, they're both very important, and we have come to trust the banking system. So there's no reason why we couldn't come to trust the coaching system. Let's step back a little bit, because before I kind of want to do since you're one of those rare people that was doing research, 3 years ago feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't. And it was such an interesting result that goal-directed coaching with a chatbot was quite successful, even in the early days. And then that obviously must have, as you said, it was a little shocking, and it must have gotten you probably excited to study further. When the generative AI like ChatGPT came out, how did you initially respond to that as a tech person? Like, what was your initial thought when that started to hit the waves, so to speak?
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started.
I'll never forget that, because I was sitting on my veranda outside of my house. It's November 2022. And I just created the latest version of Coach Vici, which the scripted version. Just for the listeners, so with chatbots, you can use scripted rule-based interface where you tell it exactly how it should respond, or you could use generative AI where you write a prompt and you put it in the black box of ChatGPT, and it comes back with hopefully something that is aligned with the prompt you wrote. So I just completed the latest version of my scripted Coach Vici, and then someone texted me and said, "Did you see this thing called ChatGPT?" I logged on and I was completely blown away. I couldn't believe, because I worked in AI many years ago, and this was just magic. It looked like magic. And then I thought to myself, then I started panicking. I was saying, oh my goodness, this is going to take over coaching. It's going to null and void the scripted chatbot I've just created. So I asked ChatGPT, can you coach me? And it said, no, I do not coach people. I am not trained to do that. This is literally November 2022. And I thought, okay. In January 2023, it could coach people, or it could claim that it could coach people. So my initial reaction was impressed with the technology, not immediately knowing how to apply it to the coaching world, but seeing potential that this, because remember, coaching is a conversation, right? If you had to coach me or I had to coach you, it's a conversation. And what generative AI and large language models do is that they've been trained on billions of examples of text, and it can create these beautifully convincing conversations. So that, in essence, is almost like a glove, a hand in a glove for coaching. And as it's improving monthly, I can see how that's also growing exponentially.
So where do we see it now then, given that you've had a couple of years? Tell me some of the research that was spawned from the early days of ChatGPT to now.
Initially, I wrote a paper to conceptually describe how I think one should design an AI coach. And it has a number of elements, but it basically took what makes human coaching successful, because I think similar things would be applicable, the working alliance, the trust, the confidentiality, all those things. And I hypothesized that should be part of an AI coaching chatbot, so that should be built into it. And then, of course, there's good AI chatbot design principles of how it should handle itself, and then ethics. So that was a paper I wrote, which is still guiding my designs, and I see a lot of people are using that with their research, which is great. But then I went on to I don't want to call it a tangent. I went on to a avenue of exploration where I asked the question, what factors are important for people to use an AI coach, right? So how should we design these AI coaches so that people will actually use them? So that led to a number of studies in technology adoption. The other category of research was efficacy studies. Does it work, and how well does it work? So I continued down that line. And then I also investigated different modalities for example, should AI coaches be able to speak to you, and should you be able to speak to it, or do people prefer to type and to text? We did an interesting study there with introverts and extroverts. I still find it interesting, the result. We had two groups of users, introverts, extrovert, or we measured that. We gave them two different chatbots. One you could type and got text reply, the other one you could speak to and it spoke back to you. And we hypothesized that introverts would prefer to type. They would not prefer to speak to a chatbot. I think that's what, when I ask in my talks, people normally have that response. The results came back and it was different. The introverts actually preferred to speak to the chatbot and to be responded back. So that made me realize we have to be very careful about what we assume works in human coaching, that we can transfer that directly into AI coaching. We might be dealing here with quite a different entity altogether. Yeah, so that was we also did some other studies on images. So if you have two chatbots, both using the GROW model, and in the one chatbot, you add images. For example, if the chatbot asks you, what goal would you like to achieve? And it flashes up an image of a target. Does that help? Does it enhance the experience? And we found, again, it's about personal preferences. Some people preferred the images, some people did not like the images. And through these research studies with the voice and text, image and non-image, click and write, we realized that AI coaching should be customized for individuals. So my future vision is that if I could do some assessment on you or get some basic understanding of your preferences, the AI coach could configure itself in the moment to adapt to you. So we would both be talking to an AI coach, but because of our different personal preferences, it can adapt to us, which I think can be quite powerful. As human coaches, we are supposed to do that, of course, meet the client in their space, but it's more difficult for humans. So I think for AI, that could be something that's relatively easy to do.
I'm curious, in one of the three areas you mentioned, adoption. Having worked now with 2 or 3 different companies that are doing AI, I find that they're targeting different audiences, which I think is wise. Some of them are targeting democratizing coaching to the large companies that at a much lower cost by giving millennials, the coach on the phone kind of thing. I'm curious, what did you discover in your research around users? Like, how do they get attracted to actually using an AI coach? Who is difficult to convince to use an AI coach? What are the techniques for getting people over the hump of their fear of technology? I'm sure you've probably looked at some of that.
And I'm sure Jonathan Passmore might have shared with you the study that they did, where they looked at a large sample of coaches, and they measured the effect of introducing AI, the notion of AI, and how it completely got them all defensive. So there's a reaction that coaches had against AI. I did a study where and I'll get back to your original question just now, but while it's fresh in my mind, I did a study where I created a chatbot that could support coaches with the sessions in between, the coachee with in between coaching sessions. So we showed this to the coaches and they used it for a bit, and then we let the clients use it for a bit. And then we did a qualitative interview study. The clients generally were very positive. They loved it. They thought it was useful, helpful. But the coaches were very skeptical, were worried that this AI coach assistant, the co-pilot, would interfere with the working alliance between them and their client. But what was telling here is that the clients said, look, I love this thing, and if my coach recommends it, I will definitely use it. But the coaches were not so keen to recommend it. So you see, we've got a bit of a standoff here. If coaches don't embrace and recommend, the uptake might be lower. So that was an interesting uptake study there.
I'm curious, what do you think their fear? What do you think their fear was, that they would be left out of the conversation?
Basically, it was around the fact that they feel they have a unique presence with a client, and the chatbot, unless the chatbot can copy and mimic them exactly, it'll cause confusion because now it's not the same type of conversation or tone that's being reported. They were also worried about the clients becoming more dependent on the chatbot assistant and less on them. So there was a bit of that fear of losing my footing here, and losing my position. So that was an interesting one. Some of the other adoption studies we did, we used something called the technology adoption model. So it's a standard measurement model. And we found in all my studies so far that of the 5 measures of what would influence people to start using an AI coach, performance expectancy was the most important. So people would need to be convinced very early on that this chatbot can help them. Effort expectancy, which is the second point, is less important. There's also things like social influence, how they feel other people, see them use the chatbot, whether other people would encourage it. And then hedonic motivation, so fun, is the second most important. It must be fun and it must be effective. Those are the 2 main factors. And then we controlled for age and gender, and we found that older people typically found it more effort to use. They were less willing to engage with it. So it's definitely, so far, it shows that younger people are more willing to do that.
That one probably we would have guessed, right? Because younger folks are more comfortable with new technology in general.
But now here's a curveball, Jeff. So this is interesting. So we demoed some of the coaching chatbots to a group of people in an organization, and the younger people got frustrated quicker than older people if the chatbot kept asking them questions.
They wanted answers.
They wanted answers, yeah, exactly. And this is where I think AI coaching is moving in an interesting direction. We teach our students that they should be non-directive, right? The ICF competencies, all of these things, very much non-directive. There's a space for directiveness, but what I'm seeing is that in AI coaching, people want a little bit of directiveness. So one of my master's students this year, we're doing a study where we will build 2 chatbots. One will be a directive, so more directive and advice giving. The other one will be more purely just question asking and non-directive. And we want to compare, do a number of measures. And I suspect we might be surprised about the level of directiveness that people want. And the reason is, I think, very simply that with ChatGPT, if you type in a question, it spits out an answer, right? You get the answer. So now if we create AI coaches prompting them to ask lots of questions, yes, there's some element to that, but you can't go on forever. I think that expectation has been set. So that's an area I'm researching at the moment to understand what is the level between directive and non-directive coaching.
I think that's really crucial. I'm really glad to hear you doing that, because My thought on that is that it is a fundamental dynamic around learning that if we're not careful, becoming an advice-giving society is a non-learning society, right? You're just being shoveled down. It's more like the Japanese education system where you're basically taught by rote. I mean, I don't want to pick on the Japanese, but culturally, there have been studies that, one of the reasons why the Western education system is considered more creativity oriented is because it does focus on asking students to learn how to learn, right? To learn how to answer the questions themselves, as opposed to just rote memorizing.
It's a good point. I wasn't aware of that, but you make a good point. And just to add to that, of course, now the danger here is that if we start going to a more directive AI coaching approach, we are reliant on the accuracy of the large language models. And as we all know, they are not always 100% accurate. I mean, we've all experienced hallucinations and things like that. So it's a very nuanced field that we have to be very careful about, and I think we need a lot more research to understand where that balance is.
So let's spend our last few minutes together on what your current research focus is, which you just shared a little bit. But I'm also interested in how you envision the future, which is now coming at us rapidly.
Inevitably in all the interviews and webinars I do, people always ask, what do you think of the future? And it's a question that I really battle with because it's just impossible to predict. So I'll venture something maybe down the line, but let me quickly tell you about my exciting research I'm busy with. I'm in the lucky situation that I have a number of master's and PhD students every year, so we team up and we research big chunks of it. So at the moment, my PhD students are working on using different types of chatbots with different audiences in different contexts. So, for example, and to see whether it works or not. So, the one, for example, is looking at using a cognitive behavioral chatbot with Gen Z to improve their emotional intelligence. Now, that sounds like a contradictory thing because literature says that they struggle with emotional intelligence because they are on their devices all the time. And here I'm coming along and creating an AI coach. But let's see, let's see if it works or not. The other student is doing also CBT chatbot for resilience in middle managers, because again, it's this layer of the organization that don't always get coaching. And then there's another one looking at the transfer of learning using AI coaching. So after you've been through a learning instruction intervention, can we use AI to embed the learning? We know it works for human coaching, but can we replicate that? And then just very quickly, some of my master students, we're looking at this directive, non-directive, and then also looking at which human-like features, which anthropomorphic features should an AI coaching chatbot have to be more appealing and to be more effective. So we plan to do lots of short little studies where we have different types. Should a chatbot have a name or not? Should it have a gender or not? Should it be humorous? What's the effect of that?
Yeah, that's the question of should it be an avatar kind of thing, right? Versus, or even a robot.
Exactly. And there's the uncanny valley effect, which you might have heard of, which is if something becomes too similar to a human, we actually have a visceral negative emotional response to it. So it was from a Japanese researcher. It's a graph basically that has a positive ascent for things being more human, and then it drops negative into this valley. So these are the things we have to explore.
What is I'm really curious. What is the turning point at which we are repulsed?
I say if it starts looking like it's difficult. If like a robot, for example, an avatar that looks not quite human could be acceptable as soon as it starts looking too close but creepy. If it's that creepy, eerie feeling of this, is this a human or not? If you're not sure it's a machine or a human, that's when the uncanny valley effect kicks in.
So if it literally gets to be too close, we start to have resistance, I guess, is what you would call it.
I will only claim what I've researched and what I can justify fact-wise. So I'm busy building a whole body of knowledge, and there's other research as well. Thank goodness, people like Jonathan Passmore and Rebecca Richmond. She's not a researcher, but she's very well versed and she's got a good intuition about these things. So I will keep collecting data and keep understanding what is possible or not. In the near future, I think there has to come a point where we have to decide whether we regulate AI coaching or not. I think that's one of the biggest milestones now. The ICF is busy with this. I'm on a panel with 5 other experts in the field, and we've created a set of ICF coaching, AI coaching standards that needs to be taken further. And the other organizations also would have to come on board and then define what is AI coaching. I don't know if you've read Tatiana Bachirova's papers. She wrote 2 very critical papers.
I did. She's very provocative.
Yeah, and I love it. I love it. It's great that she did that. So they've been all just going down the same path. So we need the people to call us to reason as well. But I think in the near future, we need that kind of regulation. We need some kind of quality control almost. Otherwise, people will start calling things AI coaching that is not AI coaching. That's training or that's advice giving. I also think coaches will find their way. We spoke a lot today about chatbots in coaching, but there's other ways to use AI in coaching. I think it's not my research area, but it's important to know that AI can help to train coaches. We use a platform where we train coaches, and it analyzes their it's called Ovida. It analyzes their ICF competencies. The students love it, and we can see a difference in the skill level of coaches that's using this platform. I know some human coaches also use AI to record a session and then analyze, summarize it, for example, and send it off to their client. So there are many ways of using AI in coaching, not just chatbots. But I think for coaches, we need to decide what is the use case that you want to use AI for. Just because there is AI doesn't mean you have to use it. Sometimes that maybe sounds a bit strange, but I think sometimes it's walking around with a hammer and everything starts looking like a nail. I, for example, don't use AI in my human coaching practice. I don't. I just coach good old-fashioned style. My AI is in the chatbots that I create. So I think there's this thing called the hype cycle. Gartner, the technology and analysis company, has a hype cycle, which starts from a beginning, and then there's a peak of inflated expectations and a trough of disillusionment. And I tell you now, we have not even reached the peak of inflated expectations. We're still going to hype this thing, and we will be disappointed down the line for sure with what we thought could happen.
It's a little bit like the late 90s and the internet, right? When they first had websites, and there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pet supply websites and every kind of website you could imagine. And people were talking about how it would be a revolution in every single kind of interaction between people. And of course it was, and it is on one level. Now there are probably 10 or 11 major companies, and the rest of them all went bankrupt. So
Exactly. And I was actually a software developer during the dot-com boom, which was the end of the 1990s, as you refer to now. And I remember clearly everyone was creating websites left, right, and center. And like you say, only a handful survived. So I think a similar thing will happen with AI.
So my last question, and then I'll let you go, because this is so fascinating, and obviously we could dig in deep, because when you mentioned cognitive behavioral training for emotional intelligence, my psychology background perked up. I'd love to hear more about that, but we only have so much time. So next time we'll dig into that. But I want to hear whether you're an optimist about the future of AI and coaching. Are you positive on it?
Absolutely. I'm very positive, purely because I see it as just another tool. It's a powerful tool that we're figuring out how to use it, but it's another tool at our disposal. It's a bit like coaching. When I started coaching 15 years ago, 20 years ago, online coaching wasn't a thing, right? You had to go to the client, meet them in the office, coach them there. And then COVID happened, and through technology, we can now coach online, and it's democratized coaching to that extent. So I think we will find ways to use it responsibly. Fortunately, there's enough dialogue going on. Now, 3 years ago, when I was one of the only people, I was at some point the only person doing research on AI coaching that I was aware of. At least now, there are webinars like this. There's lots of discussion, lots of talks. It'll start maturing quite rapidly, and we'll wrap our head around it for sure. And it'll be a powerful contributor to coaching.
Well, I am pretty much aligned with you. I'm hopeful, cautious, but I definitely support coaches to play with AI tools. And in particular, I think where I try to advocate from the Institute of Coaching is to really understand this distinction between directive advice giving AI versus coaching, because there's the Marshall Goldsmith, and there's the Marty Seligman has the Marty bot, and they're great, and I'm big fans of these experts, right? But they are advice tools; they're not coaches. And so that, to me, is one of the things we have to really start to hone in on. And so I'm glad that you're doing research on that. I'm so happy that someone like you is sort of out front and leading with your students a lot of these really, really interesting questions, ethical questions and technology questions, and at the end of the day, very human questions. So
I sometimes feel like a kid in a candy store as a researcher, because there's all the stuff that we know so little about. So it's like, what next? What next?
well, continue playing around in the candy store, because we get the value from all the candy that you're digging into. And I hope that we will get to talk again, have you back at our conference, at our webinars, whatever way we can track you down. But best of luck for your continued research, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Very much enjoyable for myself too. And thank you all for listening. Continue being part of our incredible tribe globally at the Institute of Coaching. And if you want to learn more, go to instituteofcoaching.org, where you'll find a whole surfeit and abundance of webinars and podcasts and conference videos and research to keep you busy for years and years to come. So we thank you for being members, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Tarani with Coaching Revealed.